Imagine a song so powerful, it doesn't just enter your ears, it invades your nervous system. A rhythm so infectious, it overrides your survival instinct, forcing you to move until your muscles tear from the bone, until your heart bursts. Strasbourg, Holy Roman Empire, 1518. This isn't a festival, it is a massacre in slow motion. Patient Zero. To understand the madness, we must first understand the year. 1518 was not just a bad year, it was a cursed year. The citizens of Strasbourg were living in a pressure cooker of trauma. For 2 years, frost and hail had destroyed the grain harvest. Bread was scarce. The streets were filled with the starving and the dying. Syphilis and smallpox were stalking the alleyways. The people believed that God had abandoned them, or worse, that he was actively punishing them. The collective mind of the city was shattered, waiting for a spark to ignite the hysteria. That spark came in July, in the peak of a blistering heat wave. In a narrow, silent alley, a woman named Frau Trophäa stepped out of her home. She wasn't sick, she wasn't drunk, she simply stood there, staring into the void. Neighbors watched from their windows. At first, they thought she was praying, or perhaps having a seizure. But then, the twitching started. A jerky, violent spasm, not a dance of joy, but a deep, unbreakable trance. It was mechanical, uneven, terrifying to watch. Her husband approached her, terrified. He grabbed her shoulders to shake her awake, screaming her name, but her body was rigid. Her eyes were wide open, yet she saw nothing. She danced for 4 days, then 6. Imagine the physical toll. Try to run for 6 days without sleep. Her shoes disintegrated. Her feet became raw meat, leaving bloody prints on the cobblestones. But the rhythm never stopped. Phase 2, the contagion. If it had ended with Frau Trophäa, history would have forgotten it as a singular tragedy. She was eventually taken away to a shrine in the Vosges Mountains to be cured, but she left something behind, a frequency, a contagion of the mind. Within days, 30 more people began to twitch. It spread like wildfire in a dry forest. It defied all class boundaries. Blacksmiths left their forges, tools still hot. Mothers dropped their infants in the street, abandoning them to join the circle. Priests abandoned their altars. Within a month, 400 people were dancing. We must visualize the scale of this. 400 bodies packed into the narrow, winding medieval streets. It was a mosh pit of suffering. The sensory overload was absolute. The smell of unwashed bodies, rotting wounds, and fear. The sound was not music, but the heavy, wet thud of feet stomping in unison on the stone. The sound of gasping breath. The sound of bones snapping under the strain. They weren't smiling. Observers from the time wrote that their faces were twisted in agony. They screamed for mercy. They screamed for water. They begged for the movement to stop, but their bodies were locked in a spasm that refused to break. They were passengers in their own flesh. The city council was paralyzed. The nobility watched from their balconies in horror, covering their faces with scented handkerchiefs to block the stench of the dying poor. At first, they treated it as a spiritual crisis. They banned gambling. They closed the brothels. They banished loose people from the city, thinking that sin was the cause. But the dancing continued. Desperate, they turned to the men of science, the Guild of Physicians. The medical diagnosis they delivered is a testament to the ignorance of the age. They claimed it was overheated blood, a physiological imbalance caused by the position of the stars and the summer heat. Their cure was the most fatal error in medical history. They deduced that the victims needed to dance it out. They believed that if they kept moving, the fever would burn off and leave their bodies. So the authorities intervened. They cleared the grain market. They commissioned carpenters to build a massive wooden stage. And then they did the unthinkable. They hired professional musicians, pipers, drummers, horn players. They were paid to keep the rhythm going day and night. They turned a tragedy into a grotesque festival. But the music didn't cure them. Instead, it synchronized them. The deep, primal vibrations of the drums acted as a conductor. The stage became a sacrificial altar. Those who were wavering were pulled back into the trance by the beat. The human heart is a muscle. It has limits. In the peak of the August heat, the biological reality set in. It started with the elderly and the malnourished. 15 people a day dropping dead mid-step. It was a scene of absolute horror. Massive heart attacks, strokes, severe dehydration causing kidney failure. Physicians of the time reported injuries that shouldn't be possible. Ribs broken from the sheer force of the torsion, muscles torn from the bone, a rhabdomyolysis, poisoning their own blood. The living did not stop to help the fallen. They couldn't. The trance was too strong. They danced over the corpses of their neighbors, their friends, their families. The wooden stage became slick with sweat and fluids. Eventually, realizing their mistake, the authorities banned the music. They tore down the stage. The survivors, those who hadn't died of exhaustion, were bundled into wagons. They were hauled away to the shrine of Saint Vitus, deep in the hills. There, they were given red shoes and forced to circle the altar until they collapsed into sleep. The city fell silent, but the fear remained. So, what really happened in the summer of 1518? How do 400 people dance themselves to death? For centuries, science has tried to solve this cold case. We have three main theories. Theory 1, mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria. When a population is under extreme stress, famine, disease, religious terror, the mind seeks an escape. The psychological anguish converts into physical symptoms. They believed they were cursed by Saint Vitus, so their minds manifested the curse. It creates a feedback loop. Seeing someone dance triggers the neurons in your own brain to mimic them. Theory 2, ergotism. This is the biological suspect. In 1518, the bread was made from rye. In damp summers, rye is attacked by a toxic mold called Claviceps purpurea, or ergot. Ergot contains alkaloid chemicals. It is the raw material from which LSD is synthesized. Ergot poisoning causes hallucinations, burning sensations in the limbs called St. Anthony's fire, and violent, involuntary muscle spasms. If this is true, we must ask, were they the first biological automatons in history? Humans reduced to puppets by a simple fungus. Theory 3, the psychoacoustic trigger. But neither hysteria nor fungus fully explains the rhythm, the synchronization. There is a branch of neuroscience that studies trance states. We know that specific drumming frequencies, around 4 to 8 hertz, can drive the brain into a theta state, a hypnotic trance where pain is suppressed and endurance is increased. This is used in shamanic rituals and modern raves. Centuries later, the legend of Niccolò Paganini, the devil's violinist, would touch on this fear. The idea that certain mathematical combinations of notes can bypass the conscious will. Perhaps in the desperation of 1518, the drumming provided a hypnotic cage. The rhythm hijacked their motor cortex. Was Frau Trophia the first to tune in to a frequency that human bodies weren't meant to handle? An acoustic virus waiting in the background noise of history. We have names for diseases of the body. We have names for diseases of the mind. But for what happened in Strasbourg, we have only silence.